Every Englishman treasured his birthright of liberty under the common law, which forbade slavery. The original Virginia Charter documents also guaranteed liberty. Yet the English colonies developed a form of total chattel slavery, described as degraded as any in Western civilization. How did this incredible aberration occur in view of the great Anglo-American tradition of freedom? Englishmen treasured their birthright of freedom, and for 100 years they looked with scorn on the Spanish New World venture to which slavery was so integral. Yet the Negroes brought to America, after a brief equivocal period during which their fate teetered between freedom and slavery, would fall into a form of total chattel slavery, peculiar to the North American continent, and described by Professor Herbert S. Klein as degraded as any in Western civilization. In the case of Virginia, the fate of the Negro was sealed as total chattel slavery by 1662, 43 years after the arrival of the first Negroes in Jamestown. What forces conspired during these 4 decades to produce this incredible aberration in the great Anglo-American tradition of freedom? One thing is certain. Slavery was originally illegal in Virginia and the other English colonies. The first charter granted by James I to the Virginia Company in 1606 recited that all colonists shall have and enjoy all liberties, franchises, and immunities within any of our other dominions, to all intents and purposes, as if they had been abiding and born within the realm of England. The accompanying royale or dares directed the Council of the Virginia Company to follow the common law and the equity thereof. In 1609, a revised charter placed Virginia under the king, as of our manure of East Greenwich, and reiterated that colonists should enjoy all liberties of Englishmen as if they dwelt within the English realm. Most of the early Negro arrivals at Jamestown were former slaves pirated from New Spain, but there was no institutional basis for enslaving them in Virginia. So these early blacks entered a legal limbo in which there coalesced certain fateful forces, some internal, some external, some by happenstance, but some by very foul design. Yet these forces could not have resulted in slavery, but for the astonishing silence of 17th-century English lawyers, judges, and public officials on both sides of the Atlantic. During this conspiracy of silence, the colonists borrowed the institution of slavery from the vastly different culture and jurisprudence of Spain, adapting it to their own use.
The Spanish slave enjoyed the right to marriage and other family rights. Manumission was officially encouraged, and cruel punishment was illegal. Thus, the slave in New Spain remained a person in legal cognizance, in contrast to the English colonies, where he ultimately became a chattel with no rights in legal cognizance. The allure of the vast Spanish undertaking in the New World, with its attendant wealth and sea power. And African slaving was not lost on Elizabethan England. In 1562, John Hawkins, cousin of Sir Francis Drake, conceived the idea of selling slaves to Spanish colonists, despite the Spanish embargo on trade with non-Spaniards. Hawkins picked up a cargo of Negroes on the African coast and successfully peddled them in Spanish America, thereby becoming England's first slaver. For this feat, Captain Hawkins became an instant hero at home. Drake and the other sea dogs soon followed Hawkins into the exciting and profitable game of piracy on the Spanish Main, and English slaving became merely one aspect of English piracy. Negroes were considered simply one form of booty to be taken from the Spanish. Nevertheless, those first black arrivals at Jamestown were not enslaved immediately. Rather, they were assimilated into that singular institution known as indentured servitude for a term of years improvised by the Virginia Company from the child labor laws of Elizabethan England. The Elizabethan period was hard on the poor in England. With idlers everywhere, it was generally thought that the cure-all for poverty was work, forced labor if necessary. In this situation, in 1562, 45 years before the founding of Jamestown, Parliament borrowed from the guild system in London, where it was customary for youngsters to be apprenticed to a craftsman, to learn a trade under an indenture between the craftsman and the parents for a term of years. The Statute of Apprentices, 1562, declared in part, every householder retain the son of any freeman, not occupying husbandry, nor being a laborer to be bound as an apprentice for 7 years at the least, so as the term does not expire, afore such apprentice shall be.
This statute surely acclimated Englishmen to the concept of bonded servitude, but it failed in its purposes, for the unemployment problem remained, and by the 1590s, Famine gripped England. At length, Parliament passed the Poor Laws, intended to end the wanderings of the poor. The Act of 1601 declared, "The church wardens of every parish shall be overseers of the poor, and shall take order for setting to work the children of all whose parents shall not be thought able to keep their children, and for putting out of such children to be apprentices." Other sections authorized the putting to work of unemployed adults for terms of years. So by 1606, when James I chartered the Virginia Company to plant a colony on North America, the idea of forced labor in bonded servitude was an accepted national policy of Stuart England. From 1607 to 1618, the company in London labored to recruit venturesome souls to ship over, but the Jamestown foothold remained tenuous. In 1618, the impoverished company finally hit on a simple method to assure a growing volume of new colonists, privately indentured servants. Under this arrangement, a planter in Virginia would guarantee payment of passage of a new colonist. The recruit would sign an indenture in London, becoming, on our arrival at Jamestown, the indentured servant of the planter for a specified term, such as 7 years. The concept of indentured servants in Virginia and the other colonies was thus borrowed from the English Poor Laws. Soon the method was simplified further. An enterprising captain or ship owner would himself enlist recruits at London. On arrival at Jamestown, the recruits would be auctioned off to the highest bidder for a specified term by the captain at dockside. This rapidly became the common method of immigration. The rule soon arose in Jamestown and other colonial ports that any person without fare on arrival would simply be auctioned at dockside into indentured servitude. This system, which was practical and economical and legal by custom and usage, was probably considered fair by all concerned, given the precedents for indentured labor in England. Such was the situation when the first 20 Negroes arrived in 1619. As part of a prize taken by piracy from a Spanish ship in the Indies, they were simply indentured for their passage. The proceeds of the auction went to the owners of the pirate ship. Had future arrivals continued on a casual basis, they might all have been absorbed as indentured servants and ultimately have become free Americans, but for a more than casual interest in stolen Negroes. However, to the group of English traders who owned the pirate vessel, the arrival of the first Negroes at Jamestown was of more than casual significance, for they had already introduced stolen Spanish Negroes to Bermuda and planned to use Jamestown in a similar and larger pirate scheme. There always had been and always would be enormous profit in slaving. At the peak of the trade, one could realize a 30% gain on each Negro kidnapped in Africa and auctioned in Jamestown or some other colonial port, despite an average 50% loss by death or suicide among the black cargo. This group of ship owners was loosely identified with James I and was led by Robert Rich, later to be the Earl of Warwick, a prominent investor in the Virginia Company.
Slaver, pirate, and then Puritan hero.
Nubian queens in the Nile Valley and Afro-Asiatic cultural history. The Candaces of Meroe, Meroitic Hidigo, meaning great woman, have inspired more curiosity or legend than systematic cultural historical study since they entered world history through Strabo's account of the one-eyed Candace in 23 BCE in his Geography. Biblical references not only to a Candace, New Testament Acts 8:26-1, but also to the account of the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon in Jerusalem, Book of Chronicles 2:9, have served to add adventure and romance to the legendary queens of the East. The fabled Al-Kahina, queen of the Berbers, who staved off the Arab invasion of the Maghreb from 693-98 CE when she was killed defending her homeland, is the subject of such legend for her cunning and military prowess that she has multiple identities depending upon the source. She is variously referred to as the Queen of the Hours, mountains among the Berbers, the Queen of Ifriqiya and the Maghreb among the Arabs, a Berber Deborah in Jewish accounts, and sponsor of the last heroic resistance to the Arabs by French scholars. So diverse are the accounts of her exploits that she is now a subject of historiographical analysis. Add to these the legends and historical traditions from North Africa, across the Sahel and West Africa, of women who founded cities, led migrations, or conquered kingdoms. Among these, for example, can counted the queens of Songhai, Amina of Katsina, 15th century, and Bazau Turunku, Queen Asbite of the Garamantes.
Alyssa Dido, N., the Phoenician princess and founder of the city of Carthage, 980 BCE. The Tuareg leader Nugaymeth al-Tarkiya, the star of the Tuareg archers in Arabic, who led an Almoravid siege of Valencia. Queen Zobeida, founder of the city of Tauris in Arabia in 800 AD. In modern times, past patterns continued with the Ashanti queen, Mother Ya Asantewa, who led several successful battles against British colonialism in 1900. Oral traditions of women as powerful figures or clever strategists in their roles as queens, as warrior queens, or as romantic figures have had great appeal in times past, and continue to do so in this present era of feminist or humanist interest in the subject. Survey of Afro-Asiatic ruling queens, regnant queens, those ruling in their own right, including women from kingdoms in Arabia and Southwest Asia, the northern tier of Africa, the Nile Valley, the Blue as well as White Niles, constitute a remarkable chapter in world history. For about 1,500 years, from the 10th century BCE to about the 5th century CE, an impressive number of ruling queens reigned. Among the Afro-Asiatic states of Southwest Asia and Northeast Africa, it was generally the less hegemonic states where ruling queens have prevailed. Hegemonic states include large-scale empires with major urban centers, extensive external trade, military and conquest relations with surrounding peoples, such as the Egyptian, Syrian, Babylonian, Greek, or Roman empires. While pharaonic Egypt boasts several regnant queens, of whom Hatshepsut and Cleopatra VII are the most famous, this record contrasts dramatically with the much longer Meroitic list of ruling queens. During 3,000 plus years of history, 7 Egyptian queens are known to have ruled in their own right.
That is, they were more than merely queen consorts or queen mothers. By comparison, Meroe claims at least 10 regnant queens during the 500-year period between 260 BCE and 320 CE, and no fewer than 6 during the 140 period between 60 BC and 80 AD. Beyond this remarkable difference, the Meroitic queens were portrayed as women, often alone or in the forefront of their own stelae and sculptures, dressed in women's regal clothing, while Hatshepsut, the best known of the Egyptian female pharaohs, had herself portrayed as male to garner acceptance and to refer to herself as king, there being no word in Egyptian for ruling queen. Both Ethiopian and Yemenis claim the queen of Shibu, who is known as Balkis in the Quran and in Arabic literature since the Himyarite kingdom of Saba ruled both areas. Her legend has overwhelmed all others in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic discourse. Less well known are the many queens who ruled in Arabia and in Ethiopia, probably since her time. In one area of Arabia, there were no fewer than 5 regnant queens who ruled from Adumatu in the north, the contemporary city of Al-Jawf, in one remarkable century from 744-6 to 333 BCE, are devoted to the forgotten queens of Arabia and Arabia as a land of battle queens. Aisha, the youngest wife of the Prophet Muhammad, for example, distinguished herself in the famous Battle of the Camel in 656 CE 34, Ach, where her troops seized Basra, but were eventually defeated by Ali in his drive for succession as Khalifa.
10 Ethiopia's long dynastic history was nonetheless non-hegemonic, limited primarily to the highlands. According to its own accounting, this history extends over 4 millennia, from 4470 BCE to 1973, the year of the overthrow, the last Menelik emperor, Haile Selassie. The chronological table of the sovereigns of Ethiopia, requested by C.F. Ray and conveyed to him by the Rastafari Haile Selassie in 1922. establishes the royal mythology and was translated as Adu, the Ethiopian king of kings. This official chronicle of the Ethiopian monarchy of dynastic succession descends from Menelik I, 957 BC, Lunar calendar. Included 6 reigning queens, referred to as Kandaki, co-grazing what appears to be a Kandake line. The first is Nikauta Kandaki, 736 41 BC, with 5 subsequent Kandaki line queens ruling between 332 BC to 50 AD. 21 queens are recorded as sole regent in the kingdom of Ethiopia until the 9th century CE, and several of these played critical roles in Ethiopian history. 3. The conquest of Meroe by the Aksumite king Izana may well provide the historical fiction for the Ethiopian dynastic claim to the Nubian Kandakes, as well as their kings. However, the claim is noteworthy, for it incorporates these regnant queens as culturally compatible. Makeda, identified as the queen of Sheba in the Kebra Negast, is also identified as Kanduts, or queen mother. These Kandakes could be derived from the Meroitic tradition, or be a later invention. Convergence or confusion of the Meroitic queens with the Ethiopian queens as Kendake has been noted by Vantini.
3 of the Ethiopian queens were central to significant turning points in dynastic history. 1. Makeda, queen of Saba, hence Sheba, who founded the Menelik dynasty that ruled until the overthrow of Haile Selassie in 1974. 2. Queen Ahewa, regal name Sophia, who made Christianity the official religion of the Ethiopian kingdom in 332 AD. And 3, Gudit, the Jewish queen who founded the rival Zagwe dynasty, 933-1253 CE, until the Amhara Solomonic line was restored. Quirin, 1992, 12-19. After Gudit, there were no other official regnant queens in the list of sovereigns. However, the Empress of Ethiopia at the time of Abyssinia's defense against Italian colonial ambitions in the 1930s was Queen Zaudita, the daughter of Menelik II. Some suggested cultural historical patterns. The following cultural historic patterns are suggested as possible points for further study and comparative analysis of regnant queens in Northeast Africa, including Nubia and Southwest Asia. Matrilineal succession of regents. Descent traced through a feminine line, mother to offspring. Queen mothers and other high-ranking women associated with matrilineal succession. C. Brother-sister co-regency, a feature of matrilineal succession. 2. Feminine origin myths, foundresses of cities and dynasties. 3. Warrior queens, women at the battlefield, lady of victory. Tradition 1. Matrilineality. Descent and inheritance traced through women has been a controversial subject in anthropology due to the fear that recognizing descent in the female line could lead to the false conclusion that female rule or matriarchy was the prevalent social system. This incorrect equating of matrilineal with matriarchy, made by Bachofen and his disciples, has long been resolved, but it has left a legacy of suspicion about study of historical or contemporary matrilineal societies. In Ethiopia, the historical queens, such as Makeda, were presented as sole rulers in the Kebra Nagast, but it likely that they were co-rulers of the state, side by side with their sons or brothers. In this case, Makeda would have been co-regent with her son Menelik. There is a strong correlation between the reckoning of matrilineal descent and the presence of historically attested regnant queens. This is confirmed for Cushitic Meroitic civilization and for the Nubian Christian kingdoms in the Sudan until the coming of Islam, and may well have continued past the penetration of Islam in certain Sudanic kingdoms. In Kush Meroe, all queens and kings had to be born to a queen, usually the ruler's sister. They believed their father was the god Amun. Therefore, each regent was part divine and part human, with the queen providing the human link. Flowing from this fact is the very high ranking of the queen mother, an attested fact for Kush Meroe, which is underscored, for example, in the importance attached to the presence of Taharka's mother at his coronation. One of the inscription of Taharka tells how he delayed his coronation until his mother could travel from Napata to Memphis to witness the ceremony. The queen mothers had royal titles. Taharka's mother was God's wife of Amun, and the mother of Tutankhamun, the last king of the 25th dynasty, was known as Mistress of Kush. In biographies and texts of the ruling kings, the importance of the Queen Mother can be deduced as one of the most important figures in the Kushite state. According to Adams, this exalted role of the Kushite Queen Mother, with no counterpart in Egypt, is clearly associated with the rule of matrilineal descent, where the mother was also semi-divine progenitress, whereas the mother of the Egyptian pharaoh was merely mortal since his succession and divinity came from his father. It is in the Queen Mothers that the source of the Candace tradition can be located. In the Nubian Christian period, 6th, 9th century CE, the queens and queen mothers were active in state government and were still referred to by the title Kandake. The law of succession for the kingdoms of Alwa and Dongola was matrilineal, and considerable intermarriage between the kingdoms took place. As late as 1290 AD, King Shemamum, fearing retribution for failing to deliver the backed presents, noted that he feared for his mother, his sister, and maternal aunt, who were held hostage at the Mamluk Sultan's palace. So he sent great presents so that they would be freed in Cairo. For it is the tradition that the Nubian kings be directed by women in state affairs, according to the Arab chronicler Ibn Abd al-Zahir. In 1600, Leo Africanus wrote in his travels to Nubia,